Good evening, everyone, to this evening's planning committee. Stuart, if you can, or yours need to pause. Someone needs to pause. There's a bit of feedback. John, is it your laptop? Oh, good. See, all good. So yes, welcome everyone to tonight's planning committee, so there'll be no fire drills tonight. So if you hear the alarms, do exit with us. And the agenda will be taken as in the order. We have one application to consider, and I'd like to spend at least 25 minutes on the item, but no more than 45 minutes. Before we then close into private session for training. So those in the room, please do take water at the front. It can get hot in here. And I'm just going to outline the process for those who are new here or online, because sometimes the rules change between visits and wouldn't expect you to be a frequent flyer at planning unless you are a major developer in the borough. Each of the items follow the same process. So an officer will do a presentation of the application and reference the modification sheet. And then speakers will have up to 3 minutes. So objectors first, and then ward councillors, and then the applicant and the agent, who have up to 6 minutes in total to respond. Then officers will respond to what they've heard and may make reference to, again, items raised in our technical briefing, which happens before planning. And then there'll be follow-up from officers who will take 2 questions at a time rather than 3. We've had some feedback, so we're just amending that. And then the committee can ask factual questions of speakers. So that's the objectors, the councillors, and the agents. And they'll be directed via the chair, and it'll be the rationale for that is just to gain more factual accuracy on certain things, because sometimes, even though you write it down, it's best to clarify certain things. And the committee will have some general observations. We may need to have a debate or agreement on certain conditions before a vote. And we'll move to a vote, voting first for those who are against, not voting, and voting for. Is that clear, everyone? And fantastic. So I've had no apologies. Any declarations of interest? Good. And any minutes from the last meeting? Can someone confirm they're a true and accurate account for me? Martin, thank you very much for seconding. Over to Stuart. So the first application, 22/P2258, 19 Errors Avenue, Morden.
That's it. Thank you, Chair. The application before you tonight is 19 Arras Avenue in Morden. The existing property is a 2-storey semi-detached house, 3-bedroom house, located at the junction between Arras Avenue and Ramsbury Avenue. The proposal before you this evening is conversion of the existing house, include extensions to the side, rear and roof level to create 6 flats. Those will be 2 3-bedroom flats, 1 2-bedroom flat and 1 3-bedroom flat. Just turning to the mod sheet quickly, you notice there are some amended plans as part of the proposal. These are very minor changes to the original plans. The changes include the inclusion of a green roof and some biodiversity measures. So I'm just going to talk through the proposal now and just give it some context. This is the application site here. To the east of the application site is the other half of the semi-detached property, which is number 17, which is here. On the opposite side of Arras Avenue, to the west is 21 Arras Avenue. Along here is Ravensbury Avenue. To the rear of the site, to the south, is 1A, which is a single-storey bungalow. To the north of the site is 18 Arras Avenue, which is recently converted into 6 flats. Going back to the modification sheet, there are a number of new conditions in there and amendments to existing conditions. I'd like to draw members' attention to the transport planner's response to the late information provided from one of the objectors on the parking surveys. So I'm just going to run through some of the photos now, so just give you some context of the site. This is the application site here on the right-hand side, part of a semi-detached pair. This is number 17 Aris Avenue, and number 15 here. This is another photograph from the front of the property, number 17 here, number 19 here, and the distance is 21 Aris Avenue. This is the recent development opposite the application site, number 18, which was converted into 6 flats. The application site here, this is Aris Avenue here, and down the side is Ravensbury Avenue. The application site here on the left-hand side, this is 1A Ravensbury Avenue, single-story bungalow. This is just the side elevation of 1A Ravensbury Avenue, just showing the side window, which is a window to a bathroom. This is the application site on the left-hand side. Application site here, the side garden, quite a large side garden, number 17 there in the distance. And you notice they've got a single-story rear extension. A view from Ravensbury Avenue, application site here, the single-story bungalow in the distance to the south of the site. This view is taken from Ravensbury Avenue. This is the application site here on the right-hand side. Again, number 1A Ravensbury here, 21 Aris Avenue on the left-hand side. So I'll just quickly run through the floor plans. So as I said, it's conversion of the existing house on the site with extensions to the side, rear, and at roof level to create 6 flats. At ground floor level, there'll be 2 3-bedroom flats with direct access to private amenity space. This is the garden space of the 3-bedroom flat here. This is the other 3-bedroom flat with their own garden space here. And also to the rear of the site, there was a communal garden space, which will serve the upper floor flats. Cycle parking is located in the far corner here with a number of air source heat pumps. I'll come on to those later. And also refuge storage is provided at the front. Moving up to the first floor, there will be 3 1-bedroom flats up here, 1 here. The other one's there, and 1 here. Within the roof space, there will be a 2-bedroom flat. This is just a roof drawing showing the rear dormer, the side extensions, single-story rear extension. This has been changed, this single-story rear extension, to include a green roof. This is just some front elevations of the property. So the original house would have been this section here. So there's a 2-story side extension, a further 2-story side extension, which is set back. Elevation from the rear of the property. This section here would be the original house, which had a 2-story rear wing. So this is replicated here with a 2-story rear wing, 2-story side extension, and the rear dormer. Single-story extensions at ground floor. It's a side elevation showing 1A Ravensbury Avenue here, which is the side elevation. Just some cross sections. This is just showing the bin storage in the front garden. Following consultation with the council's waste officer, we're satisfied that meets the requirements. In terms of cycle storage, this is located in the back garden here, 11 spaces, meets London Plan standards. As I alluded to earlier, there's 6 air source heat pumps over here. These have been subject of some objections from neighbours. As you can see in the modification sheet, we have considered this, whether or not this is the right location for these air source heat pumps. But we have conditioned that full details need to be provided, and maybe a better location, if possible, will be secured by a condition. So turning to the planning benefits of the scheme, or the planning considerations, I'd like to draw members' attention to the planning history of the site. It is a material planning consideration. There is a previous approval on the site for extensions to the building. That previous application was to create 1 new dwelling house. The proposal before you this evening is nearly identical to that previous approval, other than some minor changes. So it is a material consideration in terms of design and also impact on neighbours. In terms of the 6 flats on the site, officers consider it as making a good use of the site and maximising its potential, which it will help the council meet its housing targets. The proposal will also include the conversion of an existing house. Our policy CS14 requires at least 1 3-bedroom house to be provided in the conversion. In this instance, there are 2 3-bedroom flats. In terms of space standards, I can confirm all units comply with the London Plan space standards. The development also complies with the cycle parking standards. In terms of car parking, there will be no on-site car parking. The site is not within the CPZ and it has a PTR score of 2. Following the new survey done by the applicant, that was an independent survey. it concluded there would be available spaces in the local area. In a worst case scenario, if all the occupants had a car, there would be 14 cars. As I said, this would be a worst case scenario. There'd be 14 cars created by the proposal. Officers considered given the modest size of the development, the parking survey, parking as seen on the site visits, and no objection from the council's transport planner, the development is not considered to have a severe impact on the local highway network and is therefore considered to be acceptable. Bin storage has been considered, and following consultation with the council's waste officer is considered to be acceptable. Turning to the objections, there have been 41 objections against the proposal. There are 3 main objections related to car parking, from the parking survey, air source heat pumps, and the design. In terms of the parking survey, I can confirm there's been no objection to the council's transport planner. The new parking survey, which was carried out, showed a 62% parking stress, which would result in approximately 67 to 70 spaces, available spaces on the nights of the surveys. In terms of the air source heat pumps, as in the modification sheet, officers have considered that it would be best practice to impose a planning condition requiring the applicant to seek consultation with an acoustic consultant and then, if possible, relocate them elsewhere on the site. If it's not possible to meet the council's noise standards in terms of the planning condition, it may be the case that the air source heat pumps are not provided. In terms of design, as I've already said, there was a previous application on the site and officers considered that to be acceptable. So in conclusion, officers consider that the site has been maximised to provide new housing with 6 new flats. The planning history of the site is a material planning consideration that members should consider. Overall, the officers consider there's no severe impact on the local highway network, and therefore the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for introducing the item. So I'd like to now take speakers. So just referencing actually what Stuart mentioned about materiality. So we consider items and issues which impact on planning schemes, and there are some items that obviously and views that we won't take into consideration because they're outside planning law and planning policy. So if you do keep your remarks to that. So what I'd like to call first is it Alexandra? And then I'd like to call Joy afterwards. So you have 3 minutes each, and we'll have the traffic light system here, and then I'll remind you when it's your time. Thank you very much. Alexandra, do you want to start?
Good evening, members. Before we proceed, can the planning officers present this evening give an unequivocal guarantee that the transport officer has thoroughly checked and verified the data used in preparation of the new parking survey prepared by Alpha Parking Limited? If such a guarantee is not forthcoming, I request that consideration of this application is postponed until all the data has been verified and authenticated to the satisfaction of the head of planning. The issue under consideration tonight is the choice between accepting 19 Arras Avenue as providing 2 substantial family houses which have already received planning approval, or the alternative to provide a poor quality conversion into 6 flats. The case officer has strongly supported this application in order to meet the external ever-increasing targets for new housing stock. There is an equal or greater demand for large family homes. We maintain that this overdevelopment will have a severe detrimental effect on the amenity of both adjoining properties and much of Arras and Ravensbury Avenues. This resulted in 41 households objecting to this proposal. The loss of amenity will involve these substantial differences, with 6 flats overlooking from 2 living rooms on the 1st and 2nd floors, with 2 houses no overlooking from living rooms, with 6 flats, additional street parking spaces for up to 14 cars or more, with 2 houses, only 4 cars, with 6 flats, 6 heat pumps close to a neighbour's bedroom, with 2 houses, 2 heat pumps sited well away from neighbouring properties, with 6 flats, noise and disturbance from up to 14 residents and any number of guests using the gardens, with 2 houses, no additional noise, With 6 flats, a 300% increase in traffic and pedestrian movements to the site. The room sizes barely meet the internal space standards and as such will offer poor quality accommodation. The proposal states the 1-bedroom flats will only accommodate 1 person. This may well not be the case, as there could easily be 2 people or more living in a 1-bedroom flat. The case officer has not presented an unbiased report and not provided credible evidence to support her opinion that the proposal will not have an adverse effect on the amenity of neighbours. We therefore encourage members to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander. One point before we go into Joy, I do want to raise that I would try and refrain comments away from criticising the objectivity of our planning officers. But I take your point and your passion for this issue. Joy, would you please make your comments? 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, members. I live at 17 Arras Avenue, directly adjoining 19 Arras Avenue. This planning is totally out of character with the houses and bungalows in Arras and Ravensbury Avenue, and contrary to National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 124. I would claim that the character of an area is more than the architecture. I must strongly object to the case officer's conclusion, and I quote, proposed conversion would have no undue impact on neighbouring amenity. There will be 3 households on the other side of my party wall, and with living areas adjacent to bedrooms, a very high risk of noise disturbance from the new living areas, compounded by the planned removal of the chimney breasts. The adjoining garden will be shared by 5 households with the guaranteed additional noise from those residents. Flats provide a smaller area for their residents to live in, so all areas will be more intensely inhabited and windows used more than for family bedrooms. There may also be residents working from home. There is no planning condition that can restrict the total number of residents to 14. There is no parking provision, so the tenants, visitors and deliveries will increase the traffic of people and vehicles and accompanying noises across the whole area of the road. The various parking surveys have been inaccurate and do not reflect the actual situation in the street. The loss of amenities for 1A Ravensbury Avenue will be even greater. Over 14 people could be entertaining on the other side of the boundary fence, less than a metre away. It's proposed to site 6 heat pumps within a metre of their child's bedroom, and the best protection that can be suggested is a condition limiting the noise after they've installed. Number 19's first floor windows look directly out onto their garden, patio and rear door, causing an unacceptable degree of overlooking and loss of privacy. The proposed provision of 3 general refuse wheelie bins, actually of a greater size than is collected by Veolia, seems completely inadequate for the number of residents who are supposed to cooperate in sharing these and placing them out for collection, is likely to lead to pavement hazard and overflowing bins. The developer has not only misrepresented himself to me, but has not displayed the required planning notice on the site boundary as required in law, or tried to engage with the general neighbourhood as suggested in Merton's small site toolkit. For all these reasons, I ask the committee to reject this application.
Thank you very much, Joy. I'd like to now call on the ward councillors to speak. So we've got Councillor Charles and Councillor McCabe in that order. Councillor Charles.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I've got a number of misgivings about this application. The initial application for 2 family homes with a front and back garden, I thought was great and I'd be all for it. But now this is going to be 6 quite small flats. The gardens are actually going to be filled with waste bins, with bicycle hangers and with the heat pumps. There's no social housing in the 6 flats, which concerns me. Going back to the bin situation, there on the plan, there's only 3 bins 3 recycling bins, 3 food waste bins, and 3 of the other 2, the cardboard and the other one, but there's 6 flats, so they should really have a bin each. So I'm a bit concerned about that. I'm concerned about the size of the bicycle hanger that's on the picture, because it's not a bicycle hanger for 10. It's actually one that only houses 3 bikes. Now, I know this because I've actually got one exactly the same model where I live. So you're not going to get 10 bikes in there. So you're going to have 2 or 3 of the bicycle hangers, which will cut down the garden space even further. The other thing about the heat pumps is that some of them are sited behind the bicycle hanger. So if there's a maintenance problem, how are the maintenance engineers going to get to the heat pumps to repair them? So that's a consideration. I was also, the wildflower meadow sounds great, but I don't think the garden is going to be big enough for that, because it's going to have all this other stuff there. So, and the other thing I was concerned about, it says here about the water, it says that if the actual water use is too much for the 6 flats, it says here that measures can be taken to include water efficient, low flow showers, taps and dishwashers. Now, for them to have less water than they really need, because it's low flow, you don't know if they're going to have young children in the house or elderly people or people who are not well. So that is another consideration. So I would urge you to reject this particular application and go back to the one where you've got 3 family homes on the plot, which would be absolutely ideal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Charles, your passionate defence of your residents. Councillor McCabe, can I call on you to make comments, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for agreeing to allow me to speak on behalf of local residents. I've been a councillor for 37 years in a few months, and I've always avoided the planning committee. And you know, and my record of coming here and appealing on behalf of residents is not good, but this is the only time that I do come here, and that is to represent the views of local residents. That 41 of them are saying this is going to have a detrimental impact, and yet officers who don't live there say it won't. There's a question of being overlooked from the first floor, which is a loss of amenity. And I agree, this is out of character with this neighbourhood. It's, you know, traditionally been old-fashioned family houses. And the question, I think, and I will drift off because I'm no expert on planning, but the question you have to ask yourself is, where is this going? Because what happens when people up and down this street and the ones adjacent to it say, oh, well, they've given planning permission for this, let's do it. And how can you possibly object when you've given permission for 6 flats on the space of on the side of one and above one house? And where do we end up, and what will the parking look like, and what does the area become? It moves completely away from what it was. And the question that I ask is, you know, it's very easy to say this isn't going to have an impact when you don't live there, but the people that do believe this is going to have an adverse impact, and I hope you will listen to the very strong representations that they have made and recognise that these are genuine concerns and reject this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCabe, for an equally passionate defence. Now, I'd like to call on the application and agents. So it's Simon Yun and Joe Purcell. Who will be speaking first? Who are you? Sorry. Joe. Hey, Joe. Okay.
The proposed size, mass and bulk and design has already been deemed acceptable and approved by the planning department in an application submitted last year to build a large single family dwelling on the site. This application only received 1 objection from all the neighbours. Nothing externally apart from the refuse and cycling storage and garden division has changed since this proposal. I'm not sure if you're aware of the housing delivery test carried out by central government on a regular basis. All of this is published on the gov.uk website, with the latest results published in January last year. Unfortunately, these do not make great reading for Merton Council. Out of the 34 boroughs and bodies they split London metropolitan area into, Merton are the 8th lowest, only achieving 80% of their quota. To give you some perspective of how low this is, the neighbouring boroughs of Croydon and Wandsworth achieve 112%, Lambeth 134%, and Sutton 150%. Furthermore, in the year 2021, Merton's new housing delivery dropped by a further 23%. This was the 4th highest reduction in the entire metropolitan area. Central government has classified Merton Borough as a buffer authority, which basically means Merton need to start hitting their new housing targets, otherwise action will be taken by central government. To help Merton and other boroughs achieve these targets, the Mayor of London has updated the policies with regards to delivering new housing in the latest London plan. Policy H2 of the London plan states that boroughs should proactively support well-designed new homes on small infill sites, such as the application site. The policy also states that boroughs should recognise that local character evolves over time and needs to change in appropriate locations to accommodate additional housing on small sites. 19 Arras Avenue is one of these Winfield sites that London Plan is encouraging councils to grant permission to build on. It's an oversized site for an existing property and is located in an already established residential area. The current application has received 41 objections, simply for internal reconfiguration from the approved design last year. We are still proposing to deliver 2 family-sized units on the site, but to improve the housing mix, we are also proposing 3 times 1 bedroom starter homes and a single 2-bedroom unit. After consultation with the planning officers, we are proposing to improve the scheme with greater biodiversity on the building compared to the previously approved scheme, with the introduction of air source heat pumps, a green sedum roof, and introduction of bird nest boxes, bat roosts, hedgehog runs, and a meadow flower garden. To conclude, all the units are dual aspect, exceed minimum size standards, and all have access to outside amenity space. The refuse and cycle storage provided are policy compliant. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Are you going to take some time as well? Yep. Brilliant. Fantastic. Over to you, then Simon.
Good evening, councillors, members of the Planning Committee, everyone. As Joe has summarised, our plans comply with related policies and have the support of the Council's Planning Department. We've conducted not 1, but 2 independent parking surveys, but there's also a 3rd non-independent survey, all which states that we are well within parking thresholds. We have designed a very sympathetic scheme that matches existing architecture and fits seamlessly into the neighbouring houses and roads. Our proposed development is also well located within reach of local schools, hospitals, police stations, and other civic services. But forget all that. I understand the concerns that some residents may have regarding property development in general, and the stereotype of the greedy, irresponsible developer. I assure you, therefore, however, that I'm committed to the creating of an appropriate and considerate development. This isn't just about building structures. It's about being decent neighbours and sustaining the environment. Neither is it an exclusive development that is only aimed at the affluent few that we're talking about. I welcome open dialogue, as my goal is to work with the community and not against it. I'm not a huge developer with endless resources, but nonetheless, I take my role seriously and uphold the highest principles in every aspect of my work, from the impacts of construction to the inclusion of biodiversity measures. May I urge us to recognise the needs of the wider community and to judge these plans not with innate bias, but on its factual merits, and trust in the expertise of the guidance of the officers and consultants. Otherwise, the decision would feel disingenuous and unjust, where an appeal for reversal would feel justified. Separately to the delays and accumulated costs so far, it's inevitable that these matters become emotive. I have encountered resentment, hostility, perhaps intimidation as a result of these plans. That is not okay, but I do understand and I do get it. After all, we're making a decision today, right here, that affects people's houses, their homes, their lives, and mine included. But I do believe that I don't pretend that these plans will solve the borough's housing needs alone, but I do believe they'll make a meaningful contribution towards it by providing more affordable options for young families, professionals, and key workers alike, whether mixed dwellings of starter homes and family homes. Lastly, given the range of socio-economic issues many face in 2023, unfortunately, I'd have to say that most people simply cannot afford a large family house as much as they'd like to have one. Together, we are confident that the plans and the result is of a thoughtful and responsible approach. And ultimately, I'm prepared to listen and to do whatever that is reasonably required and respectfully request your approval. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Simon and Joe, for that's really helpful. And it's really positive, the attitude you're taking, Simon, as well, to supporting the community. So I'd like to bring Stuart back in. Do you have anything to add or reflect on from what you've heard? I mean, just a recap. Again, we've heard a lot of consideration and concern about amenity. We've heard again about parking. We've also heard about sort of the character of the area and how, from Councillor McCabe, that, you know, what is the sort of, how is the local plan characterise this area in terms of future growth potentially? And of course, we've heard from the applicant and agent about the importance of our housing targets, which is a strong material consideration, but also that they've adapted their scheme for both starter homes and more mature people, more sort of evolved sort of house purchases.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out that the predominant housing type in the area is houses. But as part of the application, if it was approved, the predominant housing type would remain houses. It should be worth noting that some people get concerned that, you know, once you allow one conversion, that everybody's going to do it. Our policy CS 14 of the local plan in effect prevents lots of house conversions, because as part of that policy, you have to get at least one 3-bedroom flat back into the conversion, which in most instances that stops conversion taking place because houses aren't big enough. In terms of the space standards, it was mentioned that the units don't comply. They do comply with standards. We've checked that again. In terms of the air source heat pumps, the council made a good point that some of them were located behind the cycle parking. But we have looked at that, and we consider that by securing a planning condition requiring the relocation of those air pumps following consultation with a noise consultant will be the best way forward. As the applicant alluded to, Merton has got increasing housing targets. Our housing target per year is 918 per new dwellings per year, which is a massive target to meet. So it is a material planning consideration. In terms of amenity, it is acknowledged that houses will be overlooked, but they are already overlooked at the moment. And officers don't feel that would be any worse to justify refusal. I think that covers the points, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stuart. So, colleagues, we've heard a lot of information for the last 20 minutes or so. I want to open the floor to questions, 2 at a time, starting with Jill and then Susie.
Thank you, Chair. It never ceases to amaze me that someone feels they can come in and pour criticism against officers and indeed council targets on housing and feel they're going to win votes. Just an observation that don't come in and attack us because it really doesn't work. Having said that, I'm pleased to see that the heat source pumps are hopefully going to be relocated, because it's just an appalling position and the noise doesn't help. What I would like to understand is one of the residents did point out that the wall where the chimney breasts, I believe, are going to be moved, which could exacerbate the amount of noise that penetrates. And indeed, with a busier development, there will be more noise. We understand that. Are there any measures being put in that would soundproof them any further? And if not, could we look at that condition to assist that neighbour? Because I know only too well how stressful extra noise can be on one's mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Very good suggestion. And Susie.
Thank you. I'm on noise as well, I'm afraid. There are a couple of comments at page 7 which slightly raise my eyebrows. The pumps would only run when being used. Well, if they're supporting fridges, freezers, constant electric devices, I think that means they'll be on all the time. So I just wonder whether that could be clarified. That's the first thing. The second one is the amount of noise. The idea of a low hum and a buzz, if it's constant and you're right next door, would be enough to drive anybody completely crazy. So I was wondering whether it would be possible not only to condition the site of the heat pumps, but to condition that they should not be audible at the bedrooms of adjoining properties.
Thank you. I think the challenge with that latter one is that noise travels, but I think you have a point about let's get some further clarification on what is that noise. But I think the spirit of what you're saying. So Stuart, I think we've got obviously two questions, one on the chimney breast and the adjoining wall and sound, and two on the air source heat pumps. We may need to bring in the applicant as well for a factual clarification. Do you have anything to add before I do that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. In terms of the remove of the chimney breasts and soundproofing, we can condition that. That's one way to try and help that. In terms of the air source heat pumps, I did have a conversation with the council's environmental health officer. They would be running when turned on. So there are 6, so they could be on all the time. But in the evening or at night time, that might not be running. It's just like a normal boiler in effect. But following consultation with an acoustic consultant, it may be a case that those are either reduced in numbers or taken away. It's not it doesn't go at the heart of the planning application.
So thank you for that, Stuart. I'd just like to bring in the applicant or agent on the point about soundproofing, and on a factual point, has this been a consideration in what you're presenting? And on the point of conditionality, is this something which you could consider as an achievable condition?
So yes, we was talking to Stuart about it previously, and obviously we can put sound enclosures around the heat pumps. That the whole idea of the heat pumps is they're meant to be more biodiversity than the current gas boilers used. So we are trying to improve sustainability, and I think technology has improved so much in recent years, but they are now quiet, and obviously that can be proved with sound tests and what have you in the condition.
Fantastic. So, the point that Jill raised about sound, like insulation, soundproofing, or some measures that could be conditioned in relation to that, is that an achievable condition to fit in with your scheme?
Oh yes, totally. Yeah. We put sound enclosures over it, and
not the air source heat pumps.
Oh, sorry.
The adjoining walls.
Oh, the adjoining walls. Yeah, we can put acoustic walls up. That's we can get building regs to do all that for us. But yeah, we can get building acoustic walls put in. That's not a problem.
Cool. So it is, yeah. So it's achievable. Fantastic. So another round. I want to hear from people who haven't gone first. So Martin and then Simon.
There's obviously been points raised about the parking pressures within this area. Obviously, I understand it's not in a controlled parking zone. Maybe it's an area that could well be under consideration in future for controlled parking if there is such pressures. But would the transport officer like to give further clarification, obviously, in relation to the parking survey? Because obviously residents did raise concerns about aspects of that. And from my position as a planning committee member, I would be grateful if that could be given.
That's a very, very good question. Simon.
So this is a much more trivial point, but it's about the new conditions, the amended conditions, and the thing about the wildflower planting. Just to be clear, is this in the whole bit of the grass in the communal garden, and is this something that would be there forever? I'm just conscious that fashions in planting in gardens change. We've got a wildflower meadow in our garden, but in the past we've had something different, and we might have something different in future. And I'm just a bit concerned about having something in quite so detailed that will apply for the next 100 years or something. So I just wonder if the officers could comment on that.
Fantastic. Let's take that latter point first, Stuart, and then we'll bring in our transport officer.
Yes, Councillor, that would be in the whole of the communal garden. It might be best to direct that to the applicant in terms of the type of detail.
That's a point. Yeah. So, I mean, you've seen that condition on a mod sheet. What would be your plans for that space?
So we could put the wild meadow. Well, we came up with various plans, but after changing them, we've changed them back to the original because we didn't want to confuse the councillors tonight, changing the plans at the last minute. But we could put them around the perimeter of the site, and because before we were looking at putting them in the middle, but it may take up too much of the amenity space. So I think it could be done around the perimeter of the site. It's a good boundary to have as wild meadows and trees and what have you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So does that answer your question? So, okay, cool. I just want to bring in Joy very quickly, because if you don't want to speak, it's fine. But I just saw you say no. So from an applicant, from the neighbour's perspective, I just want to understand, why would that be an issue for you?
I'm a little confused because I haven't got a copy of any of this. Is this a late addition which has been added after the plans were available?
Yeah, so there's so Councillor McKay's passed you. So if you have a quick read of that, and then that will help. So there was a condition placed for greening measures in relation to some of the points I think was in the consultation. So that's what we're referring to. Cool, thank you. So I'd like to bring in our transport officer, please, to reflect on the point that Councillor Welton raised, please. I think you need to unmute yourself, if you can.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you? Yeah, okay, thank you. There's some confusion about how we adopt the Lambeth parking methodology, Chair, and I would like to go back to my mod sheet and go through that so that members could clarify for the concerns. The application is for 6 units, and approval is based on a number of key factors and not purely on results of a parking survey and parking stress level. The information within the first survey was not false, but rather a large area was surveyed to determine parking stress. As a result, the council asked for a survey to be undertaken. Lambeth Council Parking Survey methodology is a guidance developed by Lambeth Council, which sets out guidelines on how to approach parking surveys, which is then considered by individual councils along with other environmental factors. The information simply identifies potential problems and allows the council to consider mitigating measures, often in the form of parking restrictions, and seek funding from the applicant to cover the costs. It cannot be used as a qualifying factor to refuse planning application. During the first survey, according to section 4.5 of the first report, a linear walking distance of 200 meters was used. However, they did not extend the survey under the guise of survey discretion. This was not accepted by the council, and the applicant was asked to undertake another survey by an independent company, which they have now done. The initial provider was commissioned by the applicant, and it is not for the council to check the qualification or any form of accreditation of any company or consultant used by the applicant. As a rule, when the information is received, it is scrutinized by the borough transport plan and other professionals. In response to this complaint, a cursory search was carried out, and an organization named ATC, which provides a varied number of transport-related surveys, were found on the Google site. However, the council was not satisfied with the information provided and requested this further survey to be carried out by an independent company, which is now accepted, Alpha Parking. The objection states that a plan map showing measurements should be supplied. A map showing the area surveyed was provided, and it is considered that too much emphasis is being placed on parking capacity. An application of this size cannot be refused purely based on parking capacity. It is true, Bristol Road is in a CPZ, but it operates Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and there is nothing to stop non-permit holders to park outside those hours. In fact, this is common practice. St. Helier Avenue is a red route, but there are some parking bays that can be used outside the restricted hours. That is all day on Sundays and 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Monday to Saturday. And again, this is used by residents, and there's no good reason to exclude. The objection implies that Rose Avenue should not be included because the road is too narrow. The fact is currently residents do park on one side of the road, and therefore number of parking spaces in Rose Avenue should be included. Again, the objector suggests that 200 meter or less should define survey catchment area. However, the council concurs that in reality, anyone looking for a parking space does not simply travel halfway down the road and stop at an imaginary 200-meter termination. A driver will continue to the end of the road and will continue to cruise until they find a space. Again, the Lambeth model is a guidance and not a rule. If there are safety problems, including obstructive parking, as already suggested, the council can consider low-cost mitigation measures. The Mayor's London National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 111, outlines that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or a residual cumulative impact on roads network would be severe. London Plan Mayor's integrated strategic approach to transport that supports 10 healthy street indicators, which aim to reduce Londoners' dependency on car in favor of increased walking, cycling, and public transport. The application is for 6 units, and although it may generate a few additional vehicles, it is not considered to be severe enough to refuse on highway grounds. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you so much for that very detailed analysis and feedback of the parking situation. So, no, we don't. I'm afraid we don't have the response to this. Thank you very much for being polite and asking. So what I'd like to do now, colleagues, is move on to comments. So I'll open up first to Jill and then Sherry Ann.
Thank you, Chair. Just something that sort of sprang to mind just now is that could we place a condition that whereby that should a CPZ be introduced into the area, that this house would not be granted parking permits, so that it's not seen as an added attraction, as a selling point that they can park free of. It's just an idea. And I don't know if anyone really wants a CPZ around there, but maybe ultimately that's the answer.
John's going to come in on that point. Let's pause it there for a second. Who else wants to have a comment? We had Sherry Ann. Yeah.
Hi, sorry, just to clarify, are we doing comments and then voting? Okay, I've got a few comments, if that's okay. Thank you very much to all the ward councillors and residents who've come here this evening to express their views. I'd also like to thank the developer for his email and his remarks, and thank you to the parking expert as well. I am really sorry that the developer has been the target of abuse, which is completely unacceptable, and I do also sympathise with the officers who I do understand have also been the target of some not very nice remarks. There is a way to engage in the planning process, and I understand that tempers run hot, but they should never ever spill over to the point of abuse, spoken as someone who's received death threat letters over a planning application. So I'd also just like to say, you know, coming in here and talking about Merton's lack of housing, I think that's something that we're all really aware of as planning committee members, and we will not be sort of bullied into passing the application if it's a crap application just because we have housing targets to meet. On overlooking, I absolutely sympathise with the residents, but I would like to say again that this is London, and I've said this at previous committees. My garden overlooks all the other gardens. We are in an urban city, and there is a certain degree of that. And I am satisfied that this isn't something that breaches any policy. Having said all of that, I am satisfied that the planning application does meet the legal requirements for me to say yes, and I am satisfied that there are enough modifications. And I would say to the residents, especially about parking, that's something I completely sympathise with. Before I became a councillor, my road went CPZ, and it was the best thing that ever happened to us. And I would petition for a CPZ in order to help relieve that parking pressure, if that is something that you would like. And I have no doubt that the lovely ward councillors here will push very hard for you to have that, should that happen. And thank you very much to officers for their work on this.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, I've asked John to comment back on order conditions rather than individually, but so I've forgotten that one. Susie, anyone else want to have comments? And then Tom.
These aren't really comments. It's more something I don't know or understand, which I think might be relevant. And they're really questions for the developer.
If we can, we've moved on from questions.
I know we have, but I may mention this as issues which I think might interest everybody.
If you can turn them into a comment. That'd be
Okay,
good.
my comment would be that it would be interesting to know whether, if this application is refused, the original permission for 2 substantial family homes would then be utilised. And the second one is, I'm still very concerned, very, very concerned about the noise of the 6 heat source pumps. I had a conversation last night about litigation, nothing to do with Merton, in which somebody was being driven completely insane by what was described as a low hum, exactly what we're hearing described here, and that litigation was successful. So it's an interesting thought. And on that issue, the other thing which I'd be interested for us to consider is, instead of using all 6 air source heat pumps, combining them with solar panels, because there's a lot of roof space on this. I don't know which way it orients because I don't understand the elevations from that perspective, but it seems a real possibility to me, and something which I would like to know whether it can be considered.
Thank you for converting questions to comments. And then Tom.
Yeah, I think it's quite a challenging one, because obviously, as has been stated, you know, looking from the outside, there's not an enormous change, but then clearly if you're a resident looking from the outside, there's an enormous change, because the number of people that are going to be your neighbours will drastically change, and issues like car parking, everything else. But no, I mean, I think, you know, on balance, sort of struggling to find reasons to refuse, notwithstanding kind of completely understanding all the comments that were the ward councillors, and that residents have made and actually sympathising with everything they say. But actually, yeah, I think it's a challenging one. The housing targets obviously been mentioned, and given what's being suggested isn't a sort of dramatic change on the outside. But having said that, I think that the number of conditions that are being imposed already, and the more the applicants said that they're happy to work with making changes and doing more to help the community. So all the better for that. And the suggestion about the CBZ, actually, I was going to say similar. I mean, I don't know whether there's an option to, rather than a sort of blanket restriction, maybe just sort of restrict the number to that household, or do something different with visitors. But no, it seems a fair suggestion to, yeah, at least if the residents are proved right about the number of parking spaces that will be lost as a result, to do something to mitigate that.
Thank you, Tom. Very, very good points. Michael, Leonard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to echo earlier comments where I would advise agents not come before the committee and explain our housing commitments to the planning application committee. It's generally not a good tactic. And in that sense, I'm grateful to the developer coming before us and making a more relevant argument for his proposal this evening. I have some concerns with regards to parking, and so I'd like to hear John's comments before I make a final decision. But I do understand the various need for housing in the borough, and I think a CBZ might be the way to go for the area. But yeah, I'd like to hear final comments on parking before I make a decision.
No worries. And just to clarify, we can't condition the CPZ, but what we can, what I'm going to explore, and John's going to tell us otherwise, is Jill's point about a pre-condition if there were a CPZ in place. I think, you know, the councillors in the room have heard it loud and clear, and no doubt leaflets will be going out probably after this meeting. And then Ed.
Thank you, Chair. I preferred the earlier scheme with houses, I have to say. 41 objections from the neighbours really is quite a lot of objections. I went down to visit the site. I did two visits just to check out the parking for myself, and I was down there last night. There certainly weren't 14 spaces, and I think one of the issues is there are a lot of trades vehicles, and obviously a transit van, a low loader, is going to take up more space than an ordinary hatchback. So I can understand that's going to put more pressure. The party wall aspect, I really do sympathise with the neighbour. I like the idea that, you know, acoustic soundproofing could be put in. I think that's would have to be put in there, because obviously having living rooms next to bedrooms when you've lived in a house for a while, there is going to be some noise. Really what Councillor Hicks said about the heat pumps, they do concern me. That there is a low hum that you get, and it's interesting that the developer has done what any developer would do and put them as far away as possible from this property down the bottom of the garden, which is just adjacent to that little bungalow next door. So I can understand why they've done it, and I think if they could be moved. Also, that bike hanger, that would, I don't know if I'd want that by my window either. It's all right when it's new, but you know, a couple of years, you might find that's all out of alignment. Someone coming back at 12:30, if you won't hear heavy breathing, you'll just hear that thing going up and down. So it's a shame. But in terms of planning, yeah, it's very difficult to find things that there are. It is a shame that we're trying to squeeze so much into the site. But from a planning point of view, I'm struggling. It'd be interesting to hear what John has to say before I make my mind up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've heard a good set of comments around, very thoughtful comments exploring the issues. And yeah, we've also had several conditions. So just remind me if I've missed one. So we talked about the soundproofing. We talked about just adding an informative on the green-in measures. We talked about Jill's point about potential future CPZ provision, maybe 1 permit per unit, that's something along those lines. And we talked about well, it's already in the mod sheet, but we talked about the the air source heat pump sound consultant, because these things are like boilers. So they come on when you need them, but it's where do we cite them in relation to the acoustic dampening and issues you raised there. And I think that was it. Was there any other conditions missed? Cool. John, please go through those.
Yeah, so on that point, I thought I heard a member talk about solar panels as an alternative or
Yeah, so that was, so thank you very much, Peter. So that was one of the issues. So that's, I'll open this up a little bit. So that was one of the potential conditions that may be placed on, but there's a balance on the environmental aspects and if the properties are already meeting the environmental standards. What I will do is ask John to comment on that at the end after speaking about conditions, and then I may bring in the applicant to satisfy your own desires on that, and then we'll move to a vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if I could run back through those conditions, please. So in terms of soundproofing, that is generally a measure that should be left for the building regulation stage. But I'm satisfied in this case that given the particular circumstances and the arrangements, I think there is enough justification behind that to impose a condition in this case. So acoustic insulation and soundproofing, I am happy for that to go on the decision notice. We will do that. We don't know whether there will be an approved inspector looking at this from a building control point of view or our own team. But at least if we put that condition on, we can get the details and consult our own team anyway. So I am satisfied that we've heard enough tonight that there's evidence to support that condition. So that can be added to the notice. In terms of greening measures, I just wonder if we're being slightly, the application is being slightly too specific at the moment, because it's quite usual for a general landscaping and boundary treatment condition to be applied to a consent. We can go through that in more detail, and that should secure the arrangements for at least the next 5 years. And I would be happy to add a condition for landscaping and boundary treatment, and when the details come in, to speak with the ward members about that to make sure that there are no problems from the neighbours arising from their point of view. So that would be my proposal in that sense. With regard to a possible CPZ, that is obviously out of our hands, and that is for different regulations. That makes a condition difficult in terms of meeting the 6 tests, which we will go through in the training later on. But what I would suggest is that could be achieved through a legal agreement, so that if a zone is introduced, that there is only 1 permit per dwelling, so long as the applicant is willing to sign that legal agreement. So I was wondering, Chairman, if we could ask that question.
Thank you. I was about to go to the applicant about the solar panels. So 2 questions. And one, would you enter into that legal agreement about 1, if there was a CPZ, there'd be 1 pass per house, per property rather. And the second point was raised by Councillor McCabe about what are the barriers to this build incorporating solar. Appreciate that may be subject to another application by officers if it was if it didn't meet the threshold to come back here. So those 2 points, please.
Hello again. I think quite frankly, it's a simple yes, because like I said from the beginning, I'm here to find solutions and to work with everyone. I'm not here to kind of cause problems and to make things worse. So if all we're talking about at the end of the day is noise from air source heat pumps, we can find their relocation. We can talk about replacing them with something, you know, that has less sort of creates less noise. If need be, we combine them, with boilers, etc., etc. When it comes to permits, again, happy to sign, the legal agreement. I think 1 pass per dwelling. I think that's, very reasonable. I don't see any problem with that. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, like I said, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but these, for me, are quite, relatively simple things that there are solutions for, and that's the main thing. There's nothing here that seems like an impossible challenge.
Can I just get, sorry, can I get the clarification? So great, love the tone, but can you just clarify on the solar point? Because I know it's probably obvious to you, but for my own peace of mind.
On the solar panels, I mean, that's something that I would be willing to explore. I'm not an expert in that kind of technology, to be honest. So I think it'd be dishonest of me to sort of say, yes, outright, I can do X, Y, Z, by, introducing solar panels, but I'm happy to look into it. That's all I can say and promise.
Fantastic. So I'll ask John if we can add that as an informative, that will be looked at, that will be explored for an informative. Doesn't have the same weight as a condition, but it does have legal bearing, it's part of that notice. So that, as we said, and just to want to reference back to air source heat pumps, because I appreciate we do have a tone maybe set that may be an expectation that we don't support air source heat pumps as a committee. I mean, if you look back at our committee history, we certainly do. I think the concern in this stage is making sure that the appropriate technology is there, that they're quiet. Cool. All right. So, John, do you want to go back on anything?
Yes, if I could, Chairman. So that, yes, the condition around the air source heat pumps, what I would suggest is that a noise assessment comes in around those. We consult with environmental health under their regulations. We get noise readings from various different points in the site and the neighbouring boundaries to establish what they are. See if they're within the environmental health regulations and acceptable to those officers. If that is not achievable, then that could be supplemented by an informative to say that if the satisfactory arrangements for the heat pumps cannot be achieved, the council would be willing to consider solar panels as an alternative measure, which would need to come forward as a separate application back to the committee.
Fantastic. Okay. So I'd like to bring this matter to a vote. So on the paper before us and the conditions we've outlined already, can I have those all hands voting against the application?
None, Chairman.
Not voting on the application?
None, Chairman. Oh, sorry, one, Chairman.
Voting in favour of the application?
9, Chairman.
And it is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Joy and Alex. Thank you, Peter, Caroline, and thank you, applicant and agent. We'll just pause very briefly while everyone gets themselves in order, and we'll move on to our next item, which is housing enforcement and building control. Okay, everyone, we're going to move on to the next item, which is planning appeal decisions. So that will.
Thank you, Chairman. Not too much to report actually on the appeals front. We've had 2 decisions back. The first one on page 57 for 133 Durham Road, that was just a domestic extension application. We judged that as officers under delegated authority against our house extension policy, and we decided to refuse planning permission, and the inspector agreed with us, and so the appeal was dismissed. So I'm not sure there are any lessons really to learn from there. Always good to get them right. And Arundel Avenue, that was an appeal actually against non-determination. This was quite an old application, again, house extension. You'll see from the application number on page 58 that this application dated back to 2021. We've explained to the planning committee before that we had an issue with officer turnover in the section at that time, and we missed our targets with some applications. And if we do that, the lesson to be learned here is that applicants do have the right to go to appeal against non-determination, and they can be successful. Actually, had we determined this, we would have come to the same view as the inspector and granted it. We were too slow, but we've addressed that problem now with the resources that we've got in the team. We do go over time sometimes, but we've been getting very good at securing extensions of time with developers who, on the vast majority of the time, would rather do that than go to appeal anyway. So I feel that we've addressed the issue, and it was not one, fortunately, in this case, where we think we would have come to a different outcome.
Thank you very much, John. And before I open the floor to any questions, I just need to make the committee aware, for those on SUSCOMS, you already heard this, but the committee reports into SUSCOMS from a performance and monitoring perspective. And for the last 6 months, the figures we've been providing on our performance have not been quite accurate. They have showed that we've underperformed when we've, in fact, as John has alluded to, taken a lot of action and are actually performing on target and above target. So with John's support, we'll be taking a short paper to SUSCOMS just to update the numbers and outline what happened, what the lessons learned are, and some recommendations about next steps. I mean, we can go into the ins and outs at a separate time, and I'll definitely have that paper in the next pack for you all. And if needed, we can go through it. But ultimately, this was down to a known challenge with some of the computer systems that we use and the methodology and the processes we use. But that will be addressed as part of the recommendations. Outside that point, does anyone have any questions or comments? Yep, fantastic. And so next item, planning enforcement. We have Raymond online, favourite at committee. Raymond, do you want to give us just a very brief overview of the hot list this month?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and hello to everyone at the committee. Just a quick summary of enforcement this month. In addition to the enforcement summary at the back of the committee agenda pack, we served notice at Dorset Road this week. It's for an outbuilding that's converted to self-contained dwelling house. So they fitted a kitchen, a bathroom unit inside, and a bedroom. And we saw it's listed to rent per calendar month online. And that was tantamount to a dwelling house, and we served notice on that on the basis that it was done within the last 4 years. The size and layout would fail to provide an acceptable standard for residential accommodation, living space, resulting in cramped and unsatisfactory standard accommodation. The outbuilding to a self-contained unit would not provide secure, integrated, convenient or accessible cycle parking or refuse and recycling facilities. And the self-contained unit, of course, is in the back garden, and a new dwelling would require amenity space. Not only would you reducing the existing dwelling, main house amenity space, you also have reduced amenity space for the new dwelling, and also disruption and lack of privacy and noise to the neighboring amenity. So this is a message to any landlord or owner who decides to convert their outbuilding into a dwelling house or bedroom shed. Think twice. You'll be on notice, and you get a notice for doing that. And consult your local planning authority before you start doing works like that and getting people into your outbuildings and charging them rent for it. It's dangerous. You have live wires in it. Sometimes you have vermin in there. So think about it twice. Onto the Burn Bullock in Mitcham. It's been rumbling for quite a few years, and it's a site that has been occupied by perhaps squatters or people just paying rent as informal guardians. So the pub has been turned into effectively a large house in multiple occupation. So it ceased use as a pub. It closed its doors in September 2013, which is less than 10 years away. And it's been converted into what we consider a large HMO, resulting in the detriment of the listed building. Also, the car park has been occupied by various caravans, junk storage, scrap yards, with people occupying this caravan in itself. It is at least about 5 trailers, caravans that are being occupied by people. It appears like, with live electricity wires from the main hub going into these caravans and trailers. When I went on site with Councillor Joe Manley and John in December, we spoke to a gentleman on there who was quite helpful. They told us that they're renting the piece of land at the rear car park as storage. So he's actually using it for commercial purposes. He's buying cars, he's doing it up on the car park and selling them off at auction. He also told us that there are other people renting the car park as well for storage and scrapyard uses. So there's various what we consider as material change of use in the car park around the main Burn Bullock pub itself. So we served the PCN, which is a planning contravention notice, last month, given 21 days to reply back to it. This is a requisition of information. They have to reply back within 21 days of us serving it. I served it to directors, the owners, and the occupiers. None of the PCN were returned. So what we're doing next is looking into formal action next. So that is the update on the Burn Bullock. And that should summarize the enforcement summary of this month.
Brilliant.
Thank you,
as
Chair.
ever. So people who put beds in sheds, definitely on notice. Raymond's coming for you. Thank you really much for your efforts. Does anyone have any comments or brief reflections for Raymond other than the usual vote of thanks? Jill?
I really would like to give my appreciation and gratitude to Raymond and indeed to John Berry for their very prompt and thorough action on this appalling mess we have of the Burn Bullock, which is the rear view of which you can see now, I believe, is the medieval part of the building, which is under the deepest threat at the moment from as wires you can see coming out, feeding the caravans. Local residents have been terrified for the best part of 10 years that this listed building is going to catch fire or crumble, something's going to happen. It's a precious building with huge amounts of history. So we are very grateful as a community to the council's response to my concerns. And we do hope that we will get some very positive activity now as a result of your notices. Whether they're responded to or not, activity is the real thing. As you can see, it's a mess, but thank you so much.
You have a big fan here, Raymond. All right. And well, yeah, got nods all around. So thank you very much, Raymond. Thank you very much, everyone. Unless there's any other business, call this